Canton, Mississippi, is a picturesque southern community. An historic courthouse dominates the center of town. The well-preserved stores and offices that border the courthouse square have changed little over the decades. That's why Canton has been used as the setting for several feature films, including Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And A Time to Kill. Each week, busloads of tourists arrive to visit the movie sets and browse in the many antique shops. Today, 2 old friends have come to Canton, but they are not here to inspect the usual tourist sites. Instead, they stray down a back street, heading for a dilapidated old building that hasn't been occupied for many years. They are looking for the former city jail, where they were imprisoned 40 years ago.
There were a couple of cots in here, and I remember the high windows. Well, we have the pictures that show the high windows. Oh, it was it was a day like this. It was in July. It's almost exactly 40 years ago. Oh, sure. Oh, this is marvelous. I didn't know it was going to be open. Yes, here we are. We have returned to the scene of the crime.
In 1966, Mississippi was a dangerous place, especially if you were identified as a civil rights worker. That summer, 13 college students volunteered to spend 8 weeks working in rural Madison County in a work camp sponsored by the American Friends Service Committee. We came from New York and Iowa, from California, Wisconsin, and Michigan. One member of our group was a Japanese student studying in Minnesota. We were young and idealistic, ranging in age from 18 to 22. Our home from June through August would be Valley View, a rural community populated by land-owning African-American farmers. We stayed with local families until our summer residences were ready. Those were 2 large Army surplus tents pitched in a field across from the community center. Ours was a humanitarian project, helping local people make improvements to their homes, working in the Head Start program, and building a storage shed at the center. What we did not fully realize at the time was that as white people living in a black community, we automatically would be identified as civil rights workers. Our project would become part of the civil rights movement.
When we arrived at Valley View, out in the country, we were greeted by some very strong and dedicated people. And we saw that they were trying to build a better life for themselves and for their families. There were 13 of us students. None of us had ever lived in the South before. We really didn't know what to expect. We were a little bit afraid. The state of Mississippi had a bad reputation in 1966.
On June 23rd, the day before our work camp was scheduled to begin, the March Against Fear arrived in Canton. Started by James Meredith and continued by Martin Luther King Jr. and Stokely Carmichael, the marchers were walking across Mississippi to encourage black voter registration. We were not aware that we were entering a tinderbox of racial tensions.
We was up to the courthouse having a rally, and what we wanted to do is move the rally from the courthouse to smack near school. The white citizen that owned the businesses in Canton, they had been deputized by the White Citizen Council to take care of all the outside agitators. That's what they were. They were troublemakers. So you're going to make it damn hard for them if they could. And you had state troopers on top of the school with submachine guns and stuff.
The thing was we should overcome, and we felt like since we were paying taxes here and our children going to school here, we had the right to use these grounds. We was told not to pitch the tent.
Yeah.
And we were saying, well, we're going to pitch the tent. Yeah. We should overcome. We started to go up with the pitch, the ropes on all it, and all hell broke loose because tear gas. went off everywhere.
Boom, they canistered in there. And it was just lucky. It's just luck. We were just completely lucky that nobody didn't get killed.
I remember then that Stokely and King and I were together running, and the police was starting to beat some woman, and Stokely Carmichael turned around and he says, "I gotta go and get that policeman." So he turned around, and King ran after him and tackled him, and they fell down on the street here. So he said, "You can't fight violence with violence."
Jake Friesen had come to Valley View in 1965 to work as a community organizer for the Mennonite Central Committee. He and his wife Jane would become the leaders of our project.
They couldn't come up with anybody, so I said, okay, we'll find somebody. And I just had a love for the people, so I said, we'll go. So we ended up in the Valley View, right across from the community center that the Quakers built.
He would call me and write letters from down here. I could tell that he had a great interest, and I knew that we were going to end up here. And when he finally made it pretty clear, I was very upset. But we talked it over, and I prayed about it a lot. And I just felt this was what we were supposed to do.
She was 9 months old.
All right. So glad you made it. Hi, Jake.
Yeah.
Goodness. This is marvelous.
8 former work campers began arriving in Canton on a Friday afternoon. We were greeted by some of the local residents we had worked with in 1966. We had not seen each other in 40 years. As we got reacquainted over dinner, we swapped stories of families and children, careers and travels, but mostly we exchanged memories of that summer. Together we read the weekly reports we had submitted to the AFSC headquarters, and we inquired about people we had lived and worked with in 1966. Old photographs and scrapbooks brought memories flooding back. On Saturday morning, we assembled for a tour of the county, where we would revisit the scenes of our summer. Our first stop was the Freedom House in Canton.
In approximately 1963, about give a month or two, this place was established here. The students that were down in 1964, they had to come in here and sign out, and they had to get their assignments. It was the COFO office.
The most dramatic event of our summer occurred on July 16th when we went into town to take part in a demonstration. Local leaders had ordered a boycott of white merchants to protest their brutal treatment during the Meredith March. We joined the demonstration to show our solidarity with the movement. Details of events during that demonstration remained vivid after 40 years.
They had rifles, but they weren't like a .22. This
No.
is seriously.
Yeah.
And he sort of pokes it in between us. It's a stop. It's like, don't move an inch, or I'm gonna have to use this thing.
Right.
It's like,
Yeah, absolutely.
I was coming across the square and there was no fence there, and there were deputies around there or somebody.
And they were all
somebody
armed.
smacked me up the chest. And it's like after that, it's like, wait a second.
Wait, someone hit you?
Yeah, one of the guys, he knew what was going
I think
on.
that,
and
I think
tried
that
to
we had marched around the square, and then
Where, right?
and then and then they had stopped us right about here, and the sheriff or the chief of police said, halt, if you don't disperse, you're under arrest. And we said, what should we do? Because it was a good Quaker group, we had to come to a consensus, and we couldn't come to a consensus, and then the line started marching again. And we went right around the corner and into the jail.
That's how I remember.
People were singing at first, but
that's true.
But then after a while, we kind of ran out of songs to sing, and so it was just kind of quiet. Jim was wearing a coat, a sport coat, and he put his camera underneath his coat, and so he smuggled the camera into the jail.
I was going to do everything I could to bring it in. I forget what I did. I might have tucked it under my shirt and kind of walked like this.
You were wearing a sport coat.
Oh, was I?
Yeah. I don't know why. I don't know why you were wearing a sport coat in the middle of July.
That's why they didn't challenge me.
Yeah.
While the men were held in the city jail, the women were removed to the Madison County Jail. That building is now maintained by the local historical society, so we acquired a guide from the Canton Visitors Bureau.
The museum up here on the corner is now a movie museum.
Excuse me, where are we going now?
To the old jail, Madison, on Fulton Street.
Okay.
The women were confined in individual cells until released later that evening.
I remember, feeling confident saying, it won't be too long and someone will get us out of jail.
I must have felt that because I don't remember panicking and crying. I don't remember crying.
No.
I don't remember. I remember hearing Stella.
Stella was, she was a hysterical person
and I was
anyhow.
trying to think what, now what's going to happen. And I think we tried to quiet her.
Stella was a teenager from Valley View who had joined the protest with us. Her reaction was a source of great concern.
And she also objected to the arrest.
Oh, she resisted arrest.
So therefore they put her in the cell.
Visiting the jail was difficult for Jake, who remembered his treatment in the 1960s.
Coming back and feeling like it's a guided tour of everything's over. Yeah.
It's all over. It was something in the past, but I can't understand how in the past we weren't allowed to even talk to the white people. Now they give us tours and nothing happened in the past.
See, it was built in 1870. They said it's the best kept jail, the penal structure that is probably in Mississippi and probably in the nation,
It was very rough living in Canton for Jane and me, but when we were here, we could not go into a white church because the people knew us. We were not allowed to go into the white library. And at one point when a group of us were going to go into the library, they had deputized all kinds of people with rifles standing 3, 4, 4 feet apart, standing around the library, refusing to let blacks or us, if we would have been with them, into the place there.
We next headed out into the countryside to visit the Nichols homestead. We were greeted by Leotis Nichols, a retired school teacher who now owns the homestead. His son, Lee Jr., and his wife and daughter now occupy the property. Their home was a tangible reminder of the work we had done 40 years ago. During that summer of 1966, we spent a week helping the Nichols family demolish their home. They planned to build a modern new home on the site, and tearing down the old building was the first step. Because building materials were expensive and money was scarce, we salvaged every board, every shingle, and straightened every nail. We worked side by side with Mr. Nichols and his children in the blazing Mississippi sun. When we returned to Valley View at day's end, we were tired and dirty, but satisfied that we were building a better future for a deserving family. Photos of our group at work helped to bring back memories of that project. Signe Payton was a 19-year-old Head Start teacher in 1966. She still lives in Valley View, only a few hundred yards from the community center.
We're trying to do all right.
All right. How you doing? Good to see you. Yeah. Come on.
Well, no, let's.
Hello.
As you go, you know this young fella.
Right.
don't you?
Yeah.
Yes,
I'm Ken.
this is Ken.
Long time ago, yeah.
All right.
This is
Okay.
Ken.
Jane recalled how the young Signe dreamed of living in a home with indoor plumbing and air conditioning. Now she does.
And you looked at the ceiling and said, "This is the way my house is going to look like."
Oh, okay. Okay.
And now you've got a beautiful whole thing.
Yes, it is.
I'm so
It is.
Yes. Times have
Just
changed.
working with Head Start and
Yeah.
it's what it is.
Yeah, that's terrific.
Yeah.
Signe led us down the road to the community center. In 1966, it served as the site for the Head Start program. Today it is used for family reunions and community meetings. On Sunday, we returned to the center for one of the delicious Southern-style dinners that everyone remembered fondly. Of course, a group photo was needed to mark our reunion officially. The final stop of our tour was the home of J. L. McCullough. His father, Reverend W. E. L. McCullough, was the founder of the Valley View settlement. He was our patron and protector, going so far as to use his own property as collateral to bail us out of jail in 1966. In 1982, J. L. was elected to the Madison County Board of Supervisors. Now retired, he has written his autobiography, which he autographed for us.
Here, I was born into a family of 7 children, 5 boys and 2 girls. My sister Eula B. was the oldest. I was the second. My brother Willett was third. The accomplishment I'm most proud of while I was on the board, the hospital had stopped delivering babies in Canton, and I was instrumental in getting the hospital to deliver babies again. Sheriff Noble had died, and I was able to help elect a new sheriff. And
Our visit to Canton coincided with the 40th anniversary of the Head Start program in Madison County. This was one of the first programs to operate in the United States. On Saturday evening, the community held a celebration to honor the pioneers of early childhood education in Mississippi.
It is a great, great day that we have the individuals that came here to work with us, to help free us. We didn't know then that we were living in a apartheid state, but we were. But came down to risk their lives to help us to gain our freedom.
And so the people said, well, how we gonna operate? And said, well, we don't have any money. And someone said, well, we never had any money, so that's no problem. So why we not gonna operate? They said, well, we'll go by ourselves. We'll go by ourselves. We'll start ourselves. So when you hear about no money, these were a group of people that operated 18 months with no money. I mean, 333 people worked every day with no money.
it was the first year that there was a Head Start program anywhere in the United States. It was very new and very exciting. Many of us wanted to be a part of it. And when we went to the Head Start Center there, we saw the young children who were eager to learn, and they included us in their songs and in their games.
So now we're going to ask everybody to join in and help me sing. Everybody can stand, because you've been sitting so long. Oh, yeah. On the bus, go round and round, round and round, round and round. The wheels on the bus go round and round, all around the town. But Head Start did so much, and it continues to do so much. Some people think about educating little children. Yeah. It's so much more than that. Mm-hmm. What did I do? I earned a master's degree. You know, I got started with Head Start, and I went on, and I'm very proud of that.
When we returned to our homes all over the country at the end of the summer, we found that we were much richer and much wiser. We were richer in many friendships. We were richer in the memories that we carried with us, and we were wiser because of the lessons that we had learned from watching the people in Valley View and the people who were involved in CDGM.
We look forward to you all, if you can, to join us tomorrow. We want this celebration to end at St. John Missionary Baptist Church. So please come and join us, and let's kind of give a good send-off to the movers and shakers of the civil rights movement.
The Sunday service at St. John's Missionary Baptist Church was our opportunity to gather and sing again with the people of Valley View.
Later, 40 years, come and celebrate the victories that were won way back then. Yeah. Even though we may have a long way to go, but we're here standing because of the thing that you did. Through the delegation who was here to celebrate the 40 years, we're thankful. All these men and women did was they came to support a cause to better mankind. And to what you've given is living proof. It's what you give now. Learn to give of yourself to the cause of your brother and sister.
Mr. Paul Murray is going to come, and he wants everybody to help him to sing this song that I taught him during Head Start when he was down at the community center.
Amen. How's everybody doing right now?